Today on the Art of Culinary Spaces, we explore the transformation of the John Lewis Student Center in Stamps Commons at Georgia Tech. Led by Phillip Landgraf and his Ricca Design Studios team, this ambitious renovation navigated challenges from competing design teams to shifting dining operators while maintaining a vibrant campus experience. Join us as we uncover how this adaptive reuse honored the space's past as a basketball arena and created a dynamic, flexible dining environment for the diverse Georgia Tech community. Welcome, Phillip Landgraf, as we reveal the secrets behind this model of success. Hi, welcome to this week's episode, and we're here to talk about the John Lewis Student Center in Stamps Commons at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Now, Phillip, as we get started, this project for you guys kind of came about in a very unique way. Can you share a little bit more about the internal competition that Ricca Design came up with to win this Georgia Tech product? I mean, and then expanding on that project competition, if you will, how did the competition influence the way you designed this one?
Sure. Yeah, it was definitely a fun one, a unique one for us. So when this project came out to bid, it was a design build project. So, the general contractor and the architect were really paired up together as a team, and then they looked for other consultants on their team. Because it was a competition, they were really adamant that they didn't want any information going from one team to another. So we were actually approached by 3 different teams, and our commitment to them was that we would assign 3 different studios with 3 different principals, and we would refuse to talk to each other about this project throughout the entire process. So it was kind of fun. It definitely created some internal competition amongst ourselves, which I think was really healthy. We wouldn't talk specifics about the project at all, but we said, our team's going to win. There was maybe some trash talk going on at some point in
Nice.
time.
Yeah.
So it was great. And so I was fortunate enough to be on the winning team. And then we, moved on with the project from there.
So how approaching that, knowing that you're going up against people that you work with on a regular basis, it's your colleagues, but now it's competition. How did that what kind of pressure did that put on you for this design? And also, did it inspire you to try to do something different away from the Ricca, way of doing things? Or how did that work as far as you and your team went?
Yeah. I think the team, each team probably had its own vision of the project. With the architecture and GC team, I think each of them took a different approach to the project and sort of led where we're going. Internally, we all worked under the same RFP guidelines and the vision that was set forth by the owner. But we definitely interpreted them different ways or tried to achieve them in different ways. As being at Ricca, we don't do cookie cutter design. Everything we do, I think, is very unique. And so, we did definitely after the end, kind of look at everyone else's plans and see where they ended up and like, oh, that's an interesting idea to move this here and that there. I won't say that it changed or influenced anything we did after we won. But it was really interesting just to see because it was a renovation and expansion of the building. There were certain
Right.
elements that we were trying to move throughout the building to make better connections.
Right.
So for us, it was really supporting the overall vision that the team had, and how can food, be a driver to bring students to different parts of the building? How can
Right.
food be an activator to the student clubs and organizations that live in the building? How can it, we take Chick-fil-A and Panda, I'm getting probably too deep into this, but all those drivers, bring a lot of people there. So we want them on separate
Right.
places. Some of the other teams grouped it all together. So food was in one spot.
Right.
So it was really interesting at the end to see how they took their approach and how they got there.
Speaking of approaches and how they finally got there, you guys had to go through, once awarded with it, you went through a lot of changes with the school just to get this part done. And that is a lot of changes in dining partners, operational strategies. I mean, pretty much everything that could change on you did change on you. What were some of the biggest challenges about going through all of those structural changes, from contract feeders to uh, who's going to be there and what kind of brands, everything? What all did that go through, and how were you able to navigate through those changes?
Sure. I would say communication was the key to all of it. We started with a third party vendor on board. It was Sodexo at the time. They had
Mhm.
been on campus for a number of years. Sort of in the middle of design, their contract with Georgia Tech ended. Aramark came in. So we, reviewed the plans with them. They're very supportive of where we're at. It's some tweaks to things,
Yeah.
maybe a couple equipment items here, or changing a cuisine from this to that. But we still had a hood, we still had cooking equipment there, so changing it out wasn't too terrible. And then during construction, Airmark was no longer a partner, and they decided to go self op. And so that was, obviously a big challenge for the university and understanding how to get their systems in place. And they had a slightly different vision of what some of those different platforms might be. But we just, again, communicated on what we thought was possible, what
Yeah.
could work within the budget, within the timeline, what might be put off until future renovations down the road. So just really good communication, making sure everyone's in the loop, understanding, and just dealing with the realities of what's already been done, so that we can still be on time and be on budget.
Now you talked a little bit about it did shift from one contract feeder to another contract feeder and then self-op. How going from the contract feeders to the self-operated program, can you talk a little bit about what prompted the change to that and how did it impact really the overall vision now moving forward?
Yeah, I can't get too much into the internal politics of what drove all
Of
of that.
course.
I know there was a lot of student involvement in some of those decisions. Definitely wanting
Okay.
to provide the best food service operation possible, and I think that even Georgia Tech had some changeover. I think in their leadership, which
Yeah.
new director of dining, finance, or auxiliary services came in with a different vision, and I'm sure there's a financial aspect to it. Um,
Yeah.
but but I think what kind of drove some of the decisions that were made after is I think they really appreciated the idea of leasing out some of these spaces to local, restaurateurs or local
Right.
chains. And so that was, obviously we had certain national brands that were already there, but the food hall itself was meant to be, operated by one operator. And so that created a challenge because the health department was very strict of, one 3 compartment sink, one dishwashing, one storage area per vendor. And we were relying on a lot of shared spaces. So,
Right.
there were certain spaces that were larger and had more support in them that we could really support some of those local partnerships, and others that weren't. So they really had
Yeah.
to, deal with the realities of what's in the plans and the design. And then, just understood that they had to operate some of those platforms themselves.
Yeah. Now you mentioned a little bit about it. Expand. We'll go a little bit deeper into this one. That you have the most of the concepts now are internal, I guess you'd call them, but you do have Panda Express and Chick-fil-A still in there, and everybody except those two use the central shared kitchen. How does this shared kitchen contribute to the efficiency for all the other internal brands that are a part of it?
Yeah. I think where we're seeing, definitely in our industry in general is we've got to utilize what we can with limited resources, and labor being one of those, and size and space. Buildings are not cheap to build or
Yeah.
operate. Food service is so intense on its utilities and cost to build up to health department standards and everything. Having the ability to share a lot of those resources, storage, prep, cooking, was really efficient and keeping our
Mhm.
space down and controlling the back of house size of what was needed.
Yeah.
So, and I think operationally too, not having a dishwasher, for example, in all 5, 6, 7 different venues, creates an operational efficiency when we can collect everything in one place and, have maybe
Yeah.
2 people back there instead of each different vendor having to have their own dishwasher. I think it creates, labor efficiency there as well.
Now, you also ran into another big, we'll call it a snag or snafu, if you will. You really weren't allowed to move much as far as electrical and plumbing went, so you had to kind of get creative a little bit. How are you able to keep your creativity alive of designing something new, but yet having to remain with this fixed infrastructure already there? How did you and your team decide that? Yeah, we can be creative, but we have to do this. So, what was the thought process behind all those?
Yeah, I think for us in the design process, the portion of the building where most of the food service in was new, so we had a little bit more flexibility there. It was really the existing renovated portion of the building where we had some limitations, and so I love the construction aspect of what we do. I love the design too, but I really like being in the field, and being presented with these challenges and figuring out how we can do this. So I've seen a lot in my experience, and I brought a lot of that into it, saying, hey, we can't depress the slab for these walk-ins. We're going to do a ramp interior of those. But there's a topping slab on there. So instead of doing a 4-inch ramp that the carts, has to tilt very quickly as you go up this ramp and spill back on top of you, maybe we only do a 2-inch ramp here because we've got a topping slab we can work with, and do those kind of things. So I felt like, that's one example of areas where we can bring that 50 years of knowledge that Ricca has and bring it
Yeah.
into, lessen some of those challenges, that an existing building presents.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of new and old, you had some other challenges you guys faced during this transition period where you had old and new dining facilities trying to go on, so you had to put up temporary setup areas as well. So tell the audience a little bit about how you were able to accomplish what you did for temporary and how you operated the temporary while you were still trying to build the other end.
Yeah. So this project was part of not just the John Lewis Student Center, but it also built a whole new conference center,
Right.
basically next door. There's also sort of a plaza with a couple different retail outlets there, and so it was phased. And
Mhm.
so basically, the conference center was built first, and that was always intended to become, uh, the central catering hub for the university. And so we had a large
Okay.
kitchen in there to support all the catering needs. Well, when the student center went offline with all this retail and all these commuter students that, you need to utilize that on a daily basis, like we got to find a place to feed these folks.
Right.
There's a lot of limited options out there already on campus. And so what we did is we took over, one of the large ballrooms, and we turned it into a
Okay.
temporary servery in there. And so we had, probably 4 different concepts that were going on there. Chick-fil-A and Panda were two of those. And,
Okay.
everyone really had to share that back of house kitchen that was really intended for catering. And It was definitely challenging for them at times. And there's definitely changes that happened, with participation in that, but they made it happen. And so, they set up some portable serving areas, some portable checkout
Okay.
stands, and then just had, banquet tables out there for students as they needed. For a year and a half, almost 2 years, it really worked. I mean, it
Okay.
wasn't probably a glamorous experience, but students were fed, they got through quickly, they were happy. And then obviously when the new building was built, and they had this amazing new experience, that they got to have for the rest of their time on campus.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. What were the timeline of this? Like you said, you went for a year and a half there, but what was the timeline of the project? And then are you able to discuss kind of the budget plan that took place?
Yeah, I mean, I have to go back in my memory a bit, but I think overall it was probably about a 4-year process. I think, between the competition, being awarded, design, and then
Right.
obviously that phase, construction schedule. We had multiple packages, focused on phase one while we're doing
Right.
phase two, and et cetera, et cetera. The budget was outlined at the beginning as part of the design build process. There was a budget allocated. I think reading back, a lot of it had to come from student fees and
Right.
all of that. But overall, I mean, it was a building that had been was built many, many years ago. It had been added on to. Things were at different levels. They had ADA challenges in a lot of places, so it needed it. And I think now they've got a wonderful building that's going to last them a long time.
Very good. Very good. Looking back, is there anything now that it's been open and running? Is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight? I always love picking the brain of a consultant. The looking back type situation.
Yeah, we've been on campus a couple times since then, and we've seen some of the changes that they've made. And I think some menu choices that they chose. I think their pasta they turned into just really, instead of pizza and pasta, I think it's just pizza now.
Okay.
Um, I think from what I've heard, one of their biggest challenges is, the grill station that's on the lower level. It's located next to what they call tech rec. So they have bowling
Okay.
alleys, pool tables, ping pong. It's meant to be a sort of a relaxation spot for students on campus, and it's just kind of in a awkward, challenging position. So late
Okay.
night, it probably does pretty well, but it's not really on your main path of travel or very visible during the
Oh
day
yeah.
periods. So it struggles. I think I don't even think it opens for breakfast, but I think it even
Oh wow.
struggles at lunch. So thinking about that and how we could have made it more present to the overall building, and what was probably something that we could change in the future. I think
Yeah.
the idea was always that tech rec was a draw at all times a day, and it just isn't, because students are too busy to be in the classes.
I mean, honestly, Phil, great job on this. It was a lot of fun to read about. I hope I hope our viewers actually go out and take a look at this publication and read more into what they've heard about. That's all I've got for you today. But how can our viewers find out more about you and Ricca Design Studios?
I'd say number one, go to our website, www.ricca.com. We've got all our, well, I shouldn't say all, but a huge list of our 50-year history of projects there, all our principals, all our different offices. And then you can always reach out to me directly at plandgraf@ricca.com.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Art of Culinary Spaces. We hope this conversation has sparked your creativity and inspired new ideas within the world of food service design and planning. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of our future podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode when we explore another groundbreaking project and exceptional design from FCSI members that are transforming the culinary landscape.